impressive academic and research profile with 43 peer-reviewed publications contributing to the fields of speech and hearing sciences. His research primarily focuses on speech perception in noise, spatial hearing, temporal fine structure processing, and cochlear implant signal processing. His work has been supported through ESC and ICMR, where he has been served both as PI and co-PI. In addition, he holds copyrights for software tools developed to support auditory research and clinical applications. He has supervised 2 PhD scholars to the completion, and he is currently guiding 4 ongoing doctoral researchers. His goal is to ensure that scientific findings are effectively translated into meaningful clinical practice, thereby advancing both research and patient care in audiology. We are honored to have him with us today. On behalf of organizing committee, I wholeheartedly welcome you, sir. So I request you to take over the session. Over to you, sir.
Speech signal processing. So the information what I give is already familiar to you. Please pardon me. So I'll move on to the topic, that is signal processing in human ear. So in the past 2 days, so I think the anatomy is three parts, that is the external part, the middle part, and the inner part. So the external part of the auditory system collects the acoustic sound pressure and directs it to a structure called eardrum, also called as tympanic membrane, and then it is further transmitted to the middle ear. So till it reaches this eardrum, the acoustic pressure remains as an acoustic pressure, but once it hits the eardrum, this acoustic pressure is converted into a mechanical signal, and then the same mechanical signal is further carried by 3 small bones called as ossicles, and these mechanical vibrations are transmitted to the structure called cochlea. So if you compare this to a signal processing, the function of the eardrum and the middle ear can be considered as an analog signal processing, because it just transforms the signal as it is without any sampling or digitization. So when you speak or if there is any noise produced by the fan, what does it do is it changes the ambient pressure in the room. So there is a condensation and the rarefaction waves that is alternate over a time. The same condensation and rarefaction movements are reproduced by this eardrum movement. When there is a condensation pressure wave, that will hit the tympanic membrane and that will cause an inward movement. When there is a rarefaction wave, that will cause an outward movement. This way, the alternating condensation and rarefaction movements are transferred to a mechanical vibration, and the magnitude of the sound is the frequency, the rate at which this wave changes is encoded by the rate at which the tympanic membrane moves. The magnitude, the intensity is encoded by the extent of the movement. A greater intensity, larger extent of the movement. A smaller intensity, a smaller extent of the movement. So till here, the signal processing is analog. There is no specialized process. But once it enters a specialized structure called cochlea, I'm sure this is all covered in the previous talks, right? So this is the most important organ for a hearing, and this is called as cochlea. Till here, the broadband signal, the broadband time domain signal is processed as a broadband time domain signal. But once it reaches this structure, the broadband signal is split into a series of narrowband signal, and we will be seeing little later. So the broadband analog signals are split into series of narrowband analog signals by this structure, and then this structure transmits the signal to the auditory nerve. Till here the process is completely mechanical, but once the information passes from here to here, the mechanical information is converted into an electrical signal, and here the entire signals are not passed on as it is. The cochlea samples the signal and sends only as a neural code. So from here onward, the signal processing can be considered as a digital signal processing. So till the cochlea, the processing can be approximated as an analog signal processing. From beyond cochlea, we can approximate the signal processing as a digital signal processing. I'm sure this also has been covered, how the neural signal encodes the acoustic signal. If a 500 Hz sine wave is given, the auditory nerve will not fire in a sinusoidal fashion. It will just produce one spike. It generates one electrical potential. That potential will fire at a periodic interval. That is, if you give a 500 Hz signal, the auditory nerve will produce a 500 electrical spikes. That every 2 milliseconds it will produce an electrical spike. If you give a 1000 Hz signal, it will produce 1000 spikes in a second. That is, every 1 millisecond it will produce an electrical spike. So this is how the auditory information is encoded in the human auditory system. From there, it goes to a structure called brainstem, and then it goes to the brain. So here, if you give a broadband signal, that will split the signal into a series of narrow bands, right? All this narrow band frequency information will be traveling parallelly till the brain. I just shared one small audio sample. If you have a earphone, you listen it through that. Otherwise, I just play from here. I have to come out of the slide. Madam has shared in the WhatsApp group. If you have a earphone or Bluetooth paper, can you just listen it through that? So I just want to give an idea of an auditory scene analysis. Okay. So actually this comes from the visual field, the visual signal processing. So when we just see environment, we see so many visual objects. There's a clock, there's a fan, there's a light. Like this, we are able to categorize them into small objects. Same way, auditory system also will be categorized into small objects. They are called as auditory objects. Okay. I'll just play. You can just tell me how many auditory objects are there. Just guess and tell me. If you hear through earphone, you can.
One is phone ringing.
Yeah, there is one phone ringing.
And the effect person is the effect person is talking something. Another one is
there's a bird chirping. That is called as one auditory object. And there is one male voice giving commentary about RCB. That is considered as second auditory object. And there is a female voice talking about AIISH, Mysuru. So that is one object. And there is a bird chirping. That is one object. And there is a background rain. So if you listen through earphone, you will be able to, make out that these informations are coming from different directions. Okay. Since it is played through the speaker, you will not be able to perceive the spatial difference. If you listen through the earphone, you will be able to feel the spatial difference. Okay. Now, we are able to make out these are all 5 different objects. But if you look at the spectrum, there will be some amount of overlap. The speech, there's one male speech, there's a female speech. There's a slight spectral difference, but you see a lot of overlap between them. Same thing happens with the telephone speech also. Despite there is a spectral overlap, our auditory system is able to sparse them into a separate auditory object. How that is being done, we will see one by one. Okay? How that auditory system perform these kind of process in a sequential manner. So the entire signal processing in the auditory system can be modeled as a multi-stage auditory signal processing. So this is what I said. First, the acoustic information is collected by the outer ear. That's called as pin on ear canal. and then it is routed to the cochlea. Now, this outer and middle ear signal processing can be modeled as a band pass filter. Okay. You can see the DBA filter. All of you know what is the DA weighting network, right? Actually, it is a filter with maximum passage to some frequency will be attenuated. So this filter will represent how the outer and middle ear process the signal. I'll tell you why it is. If you take an example of a white noise comes from the concept of visual white noise. White noise is a noise where it has got many frequencies and each frequency has the same amplitude. Across all the frequencies, the amplitude is same, only the phase is random. If you give such a signal to the ear will not perceive it as a flat spectrum noise. It will magnify some frequencies and it will attenuate some frequencies. That is because of the physical characteristics of the pinna and ear canal. Now, this is a typical dental ear canal transfer characteristics. Okay. Due to the resonant properties of the ear canal, this information around you can see there is a peak around 2700 Hz. That is the resonant frequency of the combined pinna and ear canal. So the information around 2700 Hz will get amplified, other frequency will get attenuated. So this can be considered as a band pass filtering action by the ear canal. That is one part of the outer ear. And then it goes to middle ear. Middle ear also is not equally sensitive to all the frequencies. It effectively transmits some frequencies, it attenuates some frequencies. So the outer ear is a band pass filter, the middle ear is also a band pass filter. So the combined action of outer and middle ear can be considered as a broad band pass filter with the transfer function equal to sum of outer ear transfer function plus the middle ear transfer function. So if we design a band pass filter mimicking these characteristics, we can exactly simulate how the external and middle ear transmit the signal to cochlea. Okay. So this is what I meant by a band pass filtering action by outer and middle ear. And once the information goes to cochlea, it splits the signal into series of a narrow band. Again, I am sure this was discussed in the first topic, the engineering model of ear. So there you have discussed about cochlear phonotopic properties. So there is a snail shape structure, right? This snail shape structure, we just stretched it. Now it is curved. We stretch and we are looking at the cochlea. So when we stretch, this is how it looks. In this, each point on the cochlea is responsible for one frequency. This is called as statical portion and this is called as basal portion. The basal most portion is responsible for encoding 20,000 Hz. The apical most portion is responsible for encoding 20 Hz. So basically the human ear can process frequencies between 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz. So between each point on this cochlea is responsible for one frequency. Now for example, this is a 2000 Hz information. When we give a 2000 Hz sinusoid, there will be a wave that will start from the basalmost portion and then gradually travel and will have a maximum excitation at one particular place. That place is called as a characteristic frequency for a characteristic place for 2 kHz. If I give 1 kHz, same with the wave will start from here, gradually travel to a place and will have maximum excitation like that. For different frequencies, there will be a different place of excitation. This is how the cochlea encodes the frequency information. So different place on the cochlea is responsible for encoding different frequencies. So if you say the cochlea has a length of 35 millimeter, if you take every 1 millimeter, does it mean that every millimeter responds only one frequency? Okay, it is not the case. every point on the cochlea is responsible for encoding the range of frequency. Okay. So if you see in this picture, if you so if I take this place, if I give 2 kHz signal also, it will gradually start from here and cross this place and go to 2 kHz. And if I give 500 Hz information, the wave will start and gradually pass through this place and go to 500 Hz. That means a single point on the cochlea will respond for many frequencies. So this property can be modeled as a band pass filter. So every point on the cochlea will allow very narrow range of frequency. So it is a band pass filtering action. So the cochlea will have many such band pass filters. So every point on the cochlea will act as one band pass filter. So there is a series of band pass filters. So this is what is shown in the previous picture. If you take one point on the cochlea, which has characteristic frequency of 1500, that means if I take one place, if I give 1500 Hz pure tone, there will be maximum excitation for 1500 Hz. If I give 1700 Hz, that frequency also will excite that place, but the excitation will be less because it will cross through that place and go to some other characteristic frequency. Same thing. As the frequency moves away from the characteristic frequency, it will stimulate, but the excitation will reduce. So the band pass mechanism of the cochlea will look something like that. It will have so it will allow the characteristic frequency at maximum power. The neighboring frequency also will be allowed, but with gradual roll off. Generally, the roll off will be very steep for the low frequencies, and the roll off toward the high frequency will be shallow. So the cochlea filter is an asymmetrical filter. So any low frequency it will attenuate very steep, high frequency it will have a gradual attenuation. So like that, there are so many auditory filters because the cochlea has got many points, right? Each point will act like a band pass filter. The question is, how many such band pass filters are there in the cochlea? Actually, practically we don't know how many filters are there. The estimates vary from 40 to some researchers are even argue that there could be 3000 auditory filters. It's a band pass filter having 3000 narrow band filters. But all practical purpose, we consider that cochlea has got 40 auditory filters. Okay? And these filters will not have the same bandwidth across the length. Generally, the low frequencies will have a narrower filter and high frequency will have a broader filter. That is, the filter that is responsible for a low frequency will allow only narrow range of frequencies, whereas the filter responsible for encoding high frequency will allow broad range of frequency. So this we call it as frequency selectivity. That means the frequency selectivity is very good in the low frequency. The resolution is very good in the low frequencies, and the resolution is progressively becomes poorer as it moves towards the high frequencies. So this is a band pass filter action of the cochlea. Now this has got an important application in the auditory perception. Now if you take a speech signal, the speech signal has got many peaks and dips in it. Let's take a vowel. Okay, so vowel will have so many harmonics. If I produce a vowel A, my fundamental frequency is 100 Hz, and it will have its harmonic 200, 300, 400 like that. But the way I approximate my oral cavities, okay, that teeth, tongue placement, mouth opening, all will determine the overall shape. So there will be a peaks and dips in the overall spectrum, and how our auditory system preserves these peaks and dips determines the perception or the intelligibility of the sound. Okay. So when you do an FFT spectrum, you will see a clear spikes. Each frequency will get a single vertical bar. But when you look at the cochlea, it won't be a defined, well-defined spectrum. That is because the auditory system has got a poor resolution. For FFT, if I give 1000 Hz and 1001 Hz, if I have sufficient length and the sampling frequency, we can differentiate 1000 Hz and 1001 Hz. But our auditory system do not do that. Auditory system has got a very poor resolution. 1001 and 1001, it will perceive as same. And this ability to separate these two frequencies depends on the characteristic frequency as well. If I give 500 and 550, my auditory system will say these two are different. But if I say 4000 and 4050, it will say both are same. That is because the resolution is good in the low frequency, but the resolution becomes poorer as you move towards the high frequency. So, as a result of this band pass filtering action, the spectrum, the well-defined spectrum will become more smoother. Okay, the spectral valley difference, the peak to valley difference will gradually smear. Okay. So, this is what happens in a normal hearing individual. What happens when the individual develops hearing loss? Mr. Saravanan would have spoken about the different types of hearing loss, conductive hearing loss, cochlear hearing loss, and neural hearing loss. Conductive hearing loss just act like a filter. It's a band pass filter. How different frequencies audibly gets affected, you can just simulate by creating an inverse filter. But the cochlear hearing loss is not like a band pass filter. The cochlear hearing loss introduces frequency resolution problem as well. Okay. So, if auditory system has got a auditory system is a frequency analyzer with a specific resolution means once the cochlear hearing loss sets in, the resolution of the band pass filter will get lost. The band pass filter will become more broader. That is, the place in the cochlea which is supposed to allow only 20 frequencies, it will allow 50 or 60 frequencies depending on the degree of damage. So, the resolution becomes very poor. As a result, what happens? The spectral valley to depth difference become much more smeared. See that if you look at the spectrum, look at this panel. This is a person with lesser degree of cochlear damage, and compared to the original spectrum, this becomes more smooth. So the intelligibility of the sound will come down, and this is greater degree of hearing loss. All the peaks and valleys are completely smeared. So his intelligibility is going to be much more poor. Okay. So because of this broadening or the poor frequency resolution, the speech intelligibility gets affected due to the spectral smearing at the level of cochlea. So this is one perceptual consequence. Even if I give a sound in the quiet itself, the person may not understand it, what sound it is. He may have to put more effort to understand. The other perceptual consequence is inability to understand speech in noise. So now, as I said, the cochlea divides the signal into many narrow bands, right? And we did not hear all the narrow bands. Some bands are more important, some bands are less important. So that is the principle made using MP3 recordings and all. If while recording, they do not store the entire information. The unwanted, the low energy segments are deleted because even if it is there, it is not going to improve the perception. But if some bands are very important, the individual develops hearing loss in those bands, his speech intelligibility is going to be affected. And that is going to be further aggravated in the speech in noisy situation. For that, we need to understand the two important cues in the speech. Now let's consider this is a narrow band waveform. The cochlea is splitting the broad band signal into a narrow band. We are just looking at one narrow band. Okay. So this time domain narrow band signal can be treated as an envelope and a fine structure. So the envelope is nothing but the slow varying amplitude over time is called as envelope. The faster cycle to cycle variation is called as temporal fine structure. Okay. In other words, the envelope can be considered as a modulator and the temporal fine structure is considered as a carrier. Okay. So in the computational terms, this is similar to the Hilbert transform. Okay. If you do a Hilbert transform, the magnitude becomes a modulator. So Hilbert transform, we do take the absolute component and low pass filter it, forming like this envelope. And the phase represents the fine structure. The cosine of the phase of the Hilbert transform will give the temporal fine structure. So this is the process the higher order system does, extracting the envelope and the fine structure. Now you heard 5 signals, right? And you are able to make out all the 5 signals. That is because of this contribution. Okay. If I say cat, bat, okay, the meaning, the intelligibility is provided by this envelope information. envelope gives the identity of the sound, what sound it is. But the fine structure will help in telling us from which source the signal has come. If there's a male person says cat, there's a female saying dog. Now you can understand both. Okay. Now this fine structure will tell you from where the dog has come, from where the cat has come. But the information about the dog and cat is conveyed by the envelope. So when the sources, source 1 and source 2 enter the auditory system, both will get mixed up. The acoustic pressure gets summed up before entering the ear canal. But our auditory system will be able to pass them separately with the help of this fine structure. Now listen to this audio example. If you see, we are going to hear a series of sinusoidal tones in the presence of a white noise. Rightmost is a white noise, and gradually move towards this side. We created a spectral notch, that is, the energy around the pure tone has been removed. Okay. He started from the left and gradually moved toward the right. Then in the first instant, you could hear almost all the tones. Maybe the softest tone you would have disturbed. Okay. But as we gradually move towards the end, what is the loudest one you could hear. Okay. Now this is one of the perceptual consequences of cochlear hearing loss. I tell you how it is. How we detect a target signal in the presence of master. Now my speech has some of the frequency components very similar to the fan noise. Fan noise may have a 300 Hz energy. My speech also will have a 300 Hz energy. Now, let's say the blue color filter. The blue color auditory filter supposed to process the target information. So the tone that we send. The tone what we gave will go through this blue color auditory filter, and the noise what we gave goes through the red color auditory filter located on both the sides. Okay. In this case, even if the energy is equal, okay, let's say I am giving 1 kHz information that goes through blue color filter, 1100 that goes through right filter, and 800 I am giving through other red filter. Even if you are giving at the same energy, we can hear the signal very clearly because our cochlea is processing in the parallel channels. The 1000 Hz is processed in one auditory filter, 1200, 800 is processed in another auditory filter. But when there is a problem, when there is a hearing loss, there is a cochlear damage, now what will happen is the auditory filters become very broader, right? If you see here, the overlap has increased. So the detection of the tone is determined by the overall signal to noise ratio in this filter. How much of the energy is passing through this filter and how much of the master energy is passing through this filter, that will determine the detectability. Data signal to noise ratio, better is the detectability. If the auditory filter is progressively become broader, now what will happen? The neighboring spectral energy, the neighboring frequencies will pass through this filter also, that will reduce the overall signal to noise ratio, that will affect the detectability of the sound. So this is what is happening in cochlear hearing loss. Even the target speech and the master are slightly spectrally different, still they will cause intelligibility problem because broadening of the auditory filter, more energy will be passing through the filter which process the target sound, leading to more masking and reduced perception. Okay. So this is called as energetic masking. So there is a energy overlap between the target and the master sound. But this energetic masking can be overcome by a process called deep listening. So here you will hear two sound. Target speech presented in a steady state noise. It is spectrally shaped noise, and the same noise is interrupted temporarily. It's a Kannada sentence. Can you tell me what it is? Can you increase the volume? I actually synthesized that minus 50 dB. Could you pick out a part of the word at least? Maybe I heard the headphones I could make out. But can you make out the presence of speech in it?
Yes.
So actually what happens is basically called the list during a shaka HI. Just listen once. I should have synthesized at the lower resonance. Okay. Now what will happen is whenever there is no energy, this is called as replacement. So the master is not a steady state always. Many a time the masters will have the interruptions. Our audio system will be able to exploit this, reduce the energy of the master. When the master energy reduces, the audio system will be able to take the glimpses of the target signal and it will be able to connect them in a sequence and try to understand. There is another. The sound comes from there. So this is called as replacement. Okay. Actually, the auditory system will get only glimpses, not a continuous signal. But our auditory system will be able to connect them together, and it will perceive as if the signal is continuous. Even though there are breaks in between, your auditory system will not feel that there are breaks. It will perceive as though signal is continuous. Okay. So that is because of our cognitive ability. The brain comes into picture. The brain tries to replace for the losses. So this deep listening also will play a role whenever there is an energetic masking. Okay. Wherever the energy reduces, in those reduced portion, it will try to take the glimpses and then try to connect them. And how it connects is once again based on the fine structure. Whichever has got a similar fine structure, all of them will be connected in a sequence to understand the meaning. Okay. So the first part is over the outer ear and middle ear process and the band pass filter, and then we have a cochlear signal processing as a series of narrow band filter, that is a band pass filter. The next stage is called as automatic gain control and half-wave amplification. Okay. So again, I'm sure this also would have been covered, the cochlear mechanics. So this is nothing but an amplifier, biological amplifier. Okay. There are three vertical stripes are there, right? Red color. They are called as outer hassle. They do this amplification process. This flask-shaped structure, that is the most important sensory cell to detect the sound. If the sensory cell is destroyed, the human cannot perceive the sound. Okay. Even if you amplify to a greater extent, it will not pass this structure and go to auditory nerve. Such individual require especially surgical intervention. So if the signal has to reach this important sensory cell, if I give a 20 dB SPL of sound, they will not be able to directly stimulate this portion. Volume So this one, 20 dB of SPL sound will not be able to stimulate the inner aircell. That's the most important structure. So these three cylindrical structures do the job of amplifying and giving it to the inner aircell. Okay. So this action can be modeled as an automatic gain control. They generally give more amplification to the low level sound and then make it available to the inner aircell. That is the important sensory cell. But as the intensity increases, they themselves can directly reach the inner aircell and they require lesser amplification. So this outer aircell provide more amplification to the low level sound as the input intensity increases, like 50 dB, 60 dB and all, start giving lesser gain. So this action of cochlea is considered as an automatic gain control. It's a biological amplifier in the AGC circuit. So what happens if the structure gets damaged? These three cylindrical shaped structure, if they get damaged, what will happen is the people stop perceiving the soft signals. If the 20 dB SPL, 30, 40 and all, the individual won't perceive it at all. But if there's a loud sound, they will perceive it like a normal hearing individual. That is called as softness imperception. They will not perceive the soft signals at all, but the loud signal they will perceive it like a loud signal itself. So when we try to compensate for this kind of damage, we have to electronically mimic this process. That is, through AGC we have to compensate for the functional loss of this outer aircell. Now we'll move on to the another cue, that is pitch cue. So we said in the 5 auditory objects there's a male voice and there's a female voice, and we were able to understand both. When you listen through earphone, you'll be able to understand both. That is with the help of the pitch cue. We see how the pitch information is derived from the auditory system. The first top one is the spectrum of a harmonic complex tone, which has the fundamental frequency of 100 Hz and is harmonic 200, 300, 400, 500. The bottom one is the corresponding time waveform. So when this time waveform enters the cochlea will be splitting them into a narrow band signal, right? And as I said, the low frequency has got a narrow frequency resolution. The filters are very narrow, the frequency resolution is very high, but the auditory filters in the high frequencies are relatively broader. So now what will happen is, since the filter is very narrow, and individual frequency can be segregated from the harmonic complex. So the 100 Hz will be coming out of one filter, the 200 Hz will come out of another auditory filter, the 300 Hz will come out of another auditory filter. So this lower harmonics will be stimulated, coded by individual auditory filters. So this process is called as resolved harmonics. The resolvation, harmonic resolvation, and such harmonics are called as resolved harmonics. But as we move through higher harmonics, like 11th or 12th, okay. Now what will happen is, the auditory filters located in those frequencies are relatively broader. The frequency resolution is very lower. So multiple harmonics will be encoded by the same auditory filter. So for example, 1000 Hz is 10th harmonic, 10th component, 1100 Hz is the 11th component. So both of them will be filtered through the same filter. So what we get is a combined output, and we get a beating like structure there, like an amplitude modulation kind of structure, right? That is because of the broader auditory filter. So the difference is 100 Hz. This amplitude modulation will be of 100 Hz. Okay, so this is called as beats. What happens when the beat is formed is, if we give two sinusoids of similar frequency, let's say 1000 Hz and 1004 Hz, when we combine them, the frequency becomes the average of these two. 1000 means the frequency will become 1002, but the amplitude won't be flat. It will have a fluctuation. The fluctuations will be equal to the difference of these two frequencies. That is, 1000 and 1004 means there will be a fluctuation of 4 times in a second, but the carrier frequency will be average of these two seconds. So the carrier is the average of two frequency, the modulation is the difference of two frequencies. So now this is the most important processing that happens in the auditory system. So now when I am speaking, my fundamental frequency is 100 Hz, so it will have an energy 100 Hz and it's harmonic 200, 300. So cochlea, it passes the 100 Hz separately, 200 Hz separately, 300 Hz separately. Now when I speak, you perceive my speech, right? There's not a quality called pitch that we call it as a low pitch. The children's pitch is called as high pitch. Even the female voice is high pitch. So each one will have a different pitch that is determined by the fundamental frequency. Generally, the pitch will correspond to the frequency of the fundamental, but it's not that the fundamental frequency has to be there in the input signal. All of us use telephones and the cell phones. The cell phones, the fundamental frequency is never present. The telephone bandwidth is 300 Hz to 3000 Hz. The fundamental frequency is always filtered out. But still we are able to make out who is on the other side, who is speaking to us. That is because of these harmonics. The harmonics give the identity of the person's pitch. Now let's take 100 Hz. The auditory now does process something similar to an autocorrelation. Okay. So autocorrelation is like we take a waveform. Let's say this is 100 Hz signal. So each cycle is 10 milliseconds. So we take this signal, copy the signal and delay it slightly and perform the correlation function. Like that, with a different delay, we try to find the correlation. So as we keep increasing the delay, at particular point of time, the correlation will be maximum. So 1 millisecond, 2 millisecond, 3 millisecond, like that. When we shift it to the 10th millisecond, there will be a perfect match. The correlation will increase. 1 second, the correlation will decrease. But when it reaches 20th millisecond, once again the correlation will increase. And 30 millisecond, the correlation will increase. So this is how the autocorrelation behaves for a sinusoidal signal. So every 10th millisecond, 20, 30, 40 like that, the correlation will increase. So that is fundamental frequency. Now go to the first harmonic, that is 200 Hz. The 200 Hz cycle duration is 5 milliseconds. So when you perform the autocorrelation, same thing. If you delay by 1 millisecond, the correlation will become poor. 2 millisecond, correlation becomes poor. As I shift to 50 millisecond, the correlation once again will become higher. So again 10th millisecond, the correlation will be higher. 15th millisecond, correlation will be higher. So every 5 millisecond, the correlation will be higher. The same thing happens for every filter output. So the autocorrelation is calculated for fundamental frequency, that is component 1, a separate autocorrelation for component 2, a separate autocorrelation for component 3, and separate autocorrelation for component 4. Like that, for every auditory filter is the autocorrelation is performed. How the pitch information is derived is, if you see here, the 10th millisecond the correlation is increased, right? Same way for this also, 5 millisecond the correlation is higher, the 10th millisecond the correlation is higher. Is it clear? So the component 1, the autocorrelation we have maximum at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. For the first harmonic 200, the highest correlation will be there at 5, 15, 20, 25, 30, every 5 milliseconds. For 300 it will be 3.33, 6.66, 9.9, roughly around 10. For 400 it will be 2.5, 5, 10.5, 10, 12.5. We see for all the component, the common value is at every 10th millisecond, every auditory filter has a common correlation function. That means at every 10th millisecond there will be a coherent firing across all the auditory filters. Same way 20, 20, 20 and 20. So at every 10th millisecond, every auditory nerve fire will be firing simultaneously. So this is called as summary autocorrelation function. Individual autocorrelation performed for each of the filters, and across all the auditory filters, what is the common delay that gives the maximum correlation? That will be computed using a function called summary autocorrelation that will give the information about pitch. So in this case, even if the 100 Hz information is not there, still the maximum correlation will happen at 10th millisecond across all the auditory filter. That gives the pitch information. So to perceive the stable pitch, we do not require all the harmonics. We require at least 7 to 8 harmonics. Beyond that, it is not going to improve further. So this is how the pitch information is put in the auditory system. So band pass filtering and the correlation, autocorrelation and summary autocorrelation. So this is an harmonic complex tone. See, there are 8 components, but we don't perceive it as 8 different pure tones. We are perceiving it as a single auditory object, because our auditory system is able to group them as an individual sound. That is based on a perceptual principle of harmonics. Our auditory system thinks that all the 7 other components are integral multiple of the fundamental, and probably they may be coming from the same source. It is grouping them. If you listen again. This is the first one. You hear a complex tone. What do you hear? There is a complex tone. Along with it, there is a pure tone. Can you see? The 5th component is slightly mistuned. It is not at 1000 Hz. In the top panel, it is 200, 400, 600. They are all in a perfect harmonic relationship. But here, the bottom one, they are not in the perfect harmonic relationship. 200, 400, 600, 800. The 5th one is not at 1000 Hz. It is 1040 Hz. So the 1040 Hz is not grouped into this object. So brain thinks that the 1040 Hz is not, it does not belong to the same source. It may be from other source. It segregates. So if the auditory object has to be formed, your brain should think that they have a harmonic relationship. Then it will assume that these sources have come from one object, and they will be grouped together. So if the harmonicity is lost, the pitch information also will be lost. So in cochlea, if you do a cochlear damage, there is a possibility that this harmonic information gets lost. As I said, the filters become broader, right? So the frequency cannot be truly encoded as it is. The frequency shift will happen due to cochlear damage. So that will affect the harmonic encoding, and indirectly that will affect the pitch perception also. Now, not only the harmonicity, this principle comes from visual science. A zebra, it's called a fence effect. If a zebra standing next to a fence, the fence will have a stripe, the zebra also will have a stripe, right? If you look at the zebra, the lines will look like as if the lines are part of the zebra. When you look at the fence, it will look like as if the lines belong to the fence. It is same in the auditory structure also. You see, we have many harmonic complex tones. The first one tone is advanced in onset. The 5th one. The second one, the first one has an advanced onset. 3rd and 4th all have got equal onset and equal offset. And the last one, the onsets are little delayed. One component has a delayed onset. So what happens to the perception we see? If you see, the 3rd and 4th you would have perceived as single object, whereas the 1st and 2nd, 7th and 8th, along with the complex tone, there is an additional pure tone. So now what happens is, it is not that they should have only the harmonic relationship, they have to be temporally coherent. Okay? So in my speech also there is a finite Hz information, the fan noise also there is a finite Hz information. They can overlap with the finite Hz information in my speech has got a definite onset and definite offset. Using this onset and offset, it will group the finite Hz in my speech separately, finite Hz in the fan noise separately. So it is not only for the onset, the same thing happens for the offset also. the tone, the third tone was separate. That is because the offset is delayed when compared to the other harmonic complex. This is what I am trying to play that time, but it is here. So actually there is a break in between. You can feel the break in the speech. So when you listen to the earphone, the first one you will be able to make out what speech it is, but you can feel the breaks in it. The third one, the same breaks remain, but you fill it with the noise. Now what will happen? Your brain will think that it is continuous. So in the first instance, there is no acoustic information, so your brain pursues the break. But in the third instance, what happens? There is a break, and the break is filled with the noise, which is completely different from the tone. But still, your brain thinks that the speech is continuous. This is once again a principle of auditory scene analysis. There is a spectral energy which is common to the speech signal. That spectral energy will be assigned to the noise as well as to the speech. That's how the speech sounds continuous. So this is better demonstrated using the tone actually. You see the tone, you can feel the break, but as the noise gets filled up, the tone sounds continuous. When the noise energy builds up and fills, the tone sounds continuous. Because the noise has some spectral component overlapping with the tone, the brain will replace the noise energy to the tone and make it perceive like a continuous tone. So move on to the last part of this presentation, that is spatial hearing. In our auditory system, we perceive the location in 3 dimensions. Can we have a small demo? We'll see whether it works out or not. I need 2 volunteers. You take students. Nothing left, just you have to survive this. I cannot guarantee it will work, but just will try. So we just close this portion. Okay, we are demonstrating how important this portion for perceiving the sound source. Generally, in the lab we fill it up with the wax and other things it works. But since we don't have anything, we will try with uploading MP3. That's okay. I got matchbox only for this purpose, not any other purpose. This works well with the matchbox. Can you close your eyes, right? It should not look okay. Look right. So you present the sound, you have to indicate, point to the sound source location. Okay. Just I think it's a poor Close your eyes. No, you are not closing your eyes. No. You are learning. So generally, no humans will locate sound source. No, still you are not. No humans will locate the sound source perfectly. called as error. We always localize the sound with some error. So normal hearing individuals will have will have less error, but individual hearing impairment have more error. Yes, more errors actually. Now, come this way. Close. The sound should not enter. Both the ears. Actually, what happened? This portion here. If it makes you get. Now, can you close the right side? Close the right side. Okay, please. Thank you. Actually, now what happens is we try to locate the sounds in 3 dimensions. Is it raining? He's getting feedback about his performance. So what happens is when I present from this side, you point the finger toward this side, but not the exact location. Same way when I present from that side, he showed the finger that side, but I present from here, but he said this side. So the spatial hearing is 3-dimensional. That is, saying whether signal is coming from towards my right side or the left side. That we call it as horizontal plane localization. Like 0 degree, 20, 30, like that. A different azimuth. That is called as horizontal plane localization. Saying whether towards my right or left. Another one is elevation perception, up or down. Okay, whether I present from here, here or here. That is the second dimension. The third dimension is saying whether front or back. Now, for all these 3 dimensions, we use different views. So first, we will discuss about the horizontal plane localization. So, when the signal present from the right side, it will reach its right ear first. After some time, it will reach the left ear. So that is called the interaural time difference. We make use of this interaural time difference to identify the location in the horizontal plane. That is cue number 1. The other cue is interaural level difference. That is, the signal is present from the right side. It will reach right ear with more energy, and when it reaches the other ear, the energy will be reduced. That is called the interaural level difference. So, both of them give a clue about where exactly the location in the horizontal plane, but each of them operate at the different frequencies. For low frequencies, the interaural time difference helps to localize the sound source. For the high frequencies, the interaural level difference helps us to localize the sound source. But speech is a complex signal, so both interaural time difference also will be there, interaural level difference also will be there. So rotary system makes use of both interaural time difference and the interaural level difference. But the interaural time difference is the most important cue. Generally, the interaural level difference can be adversely affected by the noise, reverberation, and interaural time difference is somewhat resistant to noise and reverberation effect. So the interaural time difference is a robust cue for the spatial cue perception. So as we discussed, the speech cue for the acoustic cue for the speech can be broadly categorized to temporal envelope, that is the slow amplitude modulation, the fast varying fine structure. So the ITD information is carried by both envelope as well as the fine structure, but once again the noise, the reverberation can easily destroy the envelope. So the ITD conveyed by the envelope often very minimal in the realistic situation. So the perception strongly depends on the ITD conveyed by the fine structure. So use the fine structure IDD to localize the sounds. So that's why it's very important to preserve the fine structure in the auditory devices such as hearing aids or cochlear implants. So this just once again a picture shows how the IDD is estimated, how a cross correlation is computed mathematically. We have a structure called brainstem. Just below the brain, we have a brainstem which does this cross correlation analysis. So what it does is, red is right, the blue is left. So the right ear receives the information earlier, the blue left ear receives the information with some lag. So what is that lag is computed by this cross correlation analysis. So the right ear, the brainstem, what does it do is, when there is a lag, you just shift the right ear information by different time delays. At what time delay it perfectly matches the left ear onset. That is computed to derive this IDD information. So different IDD will correspond to different location in the space. So that is the horizontal plane. The next one is vertical plane. This is where you are having major problem. Okay, you are unable to find out the location in the vertical plane, that is elevation. So this what did we do is, this structure, that is the pin outer ear, right? We completely folded. Now what had happened is, when the signal comes from the top, it will enter its ear directly and will hit the different portions on this, pin is there, right? It will hit the different place and then re-enter. So there is a direct sound and there is a reflected sound. And the direct and the reflected sound, when they summed up, some frequency get enhanced. The low frequency generally get enhanced because the time delay is too short. But the high frequency will get cancelled out. For example, 6000 Hz, very short, duration, short cycle duration. So the direct and the reflected sound can be the out of phase relationship that cancel. So due to this interaction between the direct and the reflected sound, there will be spectral peaks and dips, and the spectral shape gives the information about the location. As the location changes, the spectral shape also changes. This change in the spectrum will give information about the location. So especially the spectral dip, the high frequency gives information about the elevation. And other one is front back. Again, you had a problem with front back. When you are present from the front, you are showing the finger at the back because the pinna was folded. The signal from the front is given. It will be collected by the pinna, amplified and given. If it is on the back, it will be attenuated. So that level difference will give a clue about front back localization. So among these three, horizontal plane, up, down and front back, the most important one is the horizontal plane localization for understanding speech in a market-like situation or cocktail-party-like situation. I do not want to go into cognition, I will just stop it here. Because the peripheral processing is more related to somewhat similar to a digital signal processing. The cognition will play a different role depending on the scenario. Thank you. Is there any questions or suggestions?
So what would be the percentage of error that you wish to remove? What is the percentage of error that common speaking should have? And if it has more, then what would be that difference? So that we have to go for a medical.
Generally, the error when we measure degrees, like when you from 0 degree, if the person point the location at 10 degrees, so we measure the error as 10 degrees. So any human will have some error. So generally, if the signal is from the front, the human can locate with even 1 degree precision. But when it goes toward the lateral side, the degree of error will increase. It will go as high as 30 degrees. So generally, when the person develops hearing impairment, so this quite different. They are expected to preserve. When they are fitting the hearing aid to both ears, they are expected to preserve. But these two hearing aids do not work as a one unit. Each hearing aid work independently. So they destroy these tubes. So right now the hearing aids do not do very well in the localization. They may be focusing on audibility and speech intelligibility in noise. The localization with hearing aid is poor. In fact, without the hearing aid, the hearing implant will do better in localization than with hearing aid.
As we come to the end of the morning session, now I would like to thank Dr. P. Arivudai Nambi, Associate Professor, Department of Audiology, AIISH, Mysuru. On behalf of organizing committee, I wholeheartedly thank you.